morning. This is Linda again, and I am really excited about this week's guest on my podcast because and I'm not going to say an old friend, she's a longtime friend, but you can see we both have enough gray hair to probably qualify for the old too. But uh,
Right.
we were just kind of joking about that actually before we got on. But Ellen Bristol and I met, I forget how long ago it was.
No, it was around 2009 or 10.
I thought it was somewhere around
Yeah.
there.
So
We met
that's,
through Charity Channel, and we ended up co-authoring a book together. And I'm sure Ellen will tell you more about her book and other books that she's written in addition to that. So I'm going to jump right in and first of all start by telling you that Ellen is with Bristol Strategy Group. That's important to know. But I wanted to ask you, Ellen, what makes Bristol Strategy Group different from other fundraising consultants? You and I have both known many, many consultants over the years, and I think we both have a unique approach. So let me ask you about Bristol Strategy and what makes you different.
well, there's a couple of things. First of all, I think I'm the only fundraising consultant in the world who never worked as a fundraising professional for a nonprofit. The reason I got fascinated with nonprofits was I put in over 20 years of my life working in corporate sales, selling mainframe computers. Many of our listeners don't know what a mainframe computer is or never heard of it. Or anyway, this is back in the day when computers were gigantic machines in separate rooms that had water-cooled floors and plumbing and cost literally millions of dollars and did less than this smartwatch that I'm wearing here. But the last corporation I worked for, which was a Fortune 30 company, crumbled in the mid-90s, like so many of those huge hardware-driven companies crumbled. And I lost my job and got a minuscule severance package. And my husband had been saying to me, why the hell don't you quit and start your own business? Because that's really what you should do. And I said, funny you should mention that. So I started a small consulting practice, and at first I worked with for-profits, but I kept running into these small nonprofits, and I just kept saying to them, I could help you. The way you're going about generating income could be improved. And after a while, I realized anywhere between 40 and 100% of my practice was working with nonprofits as if these were placeholders. And I thought, Ellen, get with it. These people like what you're doing. They need what you're doing, and they're grateful when you help them. So I said, okay, that's it. From here on out, Bristol Strategy Group is dedicated to the nonprofit sector. One more thing I'll add. I had actually designed a methodology, a formal methodology, to create higher productivity among sales teams. And I said, it's trademarked. It was trademarked as Selling the SMART Way. I said, okay, let's repurpose it as Fundraising the SMART Way. So those are two of the things that I think make Bristol Strategy a little different. We don't just come in and say, we know how to raise money, do what we say. I said, you know what? It's just like sales. Salespeople know what they're doing, or maybe they don't. Sales managers are where success or failure really comes from. And that's what I discovered, Fundraising the SMART Way, and the assessments we built called the Leaky Bucket are all aimed at finding out what are the management and operational practices around fundraising that keep people, that give the fundraising team, including volunteers, guidelines and guardrails, what to do and what to avoid doing. And we are able to capture a lot of data that helps senior management and the board understand what's going on and make good decisions.
I think maybe that's why Ellen and I hit it off so well when we first met, because I thought I was a little crazy starting a consulting business when I only had 5 years in the nonprofit sector. And then I meet Ellen, who says I had no years in the nonprofit sector before I started my business. So I think we were natural, and we both are logical thinkers. I think that was the other thing
Exactly.
that probably attracted me to Ellen, because I believed like she did that, there's got to be a better way of doing things, and you got to track things, and you're going to keep track of what you're doing. So it sounds like you got your ideas originally from your work in the sales field, I'm assuming. And I think I got some of my ideas from my experience was 11 years in banking before I went into this. But tell us about, what really prompted you to come up with all these ideas?
It pained me to see nonprofits with great missions and great ability to effect social change in a positive way, struggling so, and finding that funding their operations was just such a miserable hit or miss, unpredictable task. Now, I think something else you and I share, Linda, is we don't tend to focus on the Harvards of the world, right? 85% of the nonprofit population of nonprofit organizations raise less than $50,000 a year. And then there's a decent sized chunk in the middle that raise $1 million to $10 million. And they're underserved and they have so much to offer. Well, it pained me to see this. It was these folks were, I think they were happy to see somebody like you and somebody like me, because instead of saying, oh, and if somebody else wants to sell me something, which was my experience in sales, go away, kid. I don't want to buy anything. People would say, can you help? Wasn't that your experience too?
It was, and I like you was focused mainly on the small organizations, because I thought I'm starting a business and I have only 5 years experience. The bigger guys, the big companies of this world are out there serving the Harvards and the MITs and the big
And
museums.
the big
And
hospital
those
system.
small organizations just weren't getting help. So I really was intrigued by your concept, and I think that's why you and I became friends and are still friends.
And are still friends after, it seems like 5 minutes,
Yeah,
but
I know.
longer than
It
that.
does. But the one thing that you told me about a little bit about, and I wanted you to really expand on this, and it kind of brought some memories to me, because Ellen and I are at the age where we didn't have Tamagotchis, and we didn't have AI, and we didn't have all kind of computer toys to play with. So what did we do? We went outside and made mud pies. And I still have the scar on my wrist to prove I was making a mud pie, filling the dirt in a glass, a drinking glass, and the glass broke, and I still have a scar to prove that I played with mud pies a heck of a lot when I was a kid. So I want to hear about your mud pie factory. This just has me fascinated. So tell me
Oh, this is
about that.
a good story. You know, When I was in college, and this probably happened to you too, people said to me, listen to us female persons out there. Oh, you're going to college to get your MRS degree, right? The only real reason to go to college in the 60s for women, excuse me, I was going to say girls, was to be a nurse, a secretary, a teacher, or a wife. And priority one was to snag a husband. I'm happily married, but that's beside the point. But when I was a child, my father was an entrepreneur. His two brothers were entrepreneurs. And many of the male members of my mother's larger family were also entrepreneurs. So I kind of grew up in an entrepreneurial family. And when I was 6 or 7, we had moved to a new house, and between our driveway and the Johnsons' driveway, the Johnsons had put up bushes, and our part of the driveway hadn't been landscaped. So Daddy landscaped the driveway. And at one end of the driveway, he gave up. Enough. Nobody sees this. So it was just dirt. And I decided I wanted to play in the dirt. We had cobblestones along the driveway. And I started to dig in the dirt. And then I found, oh, some of the dirt is really nice and fine. Mom, can I borrow the sieve? My mother gives me her favorite sieve. My mother deserves a star in her crown. And she gives me a spoon and a mixing bowl. And I started to make mud pies. And then after a while, I realized, now I didn't use this language. So I'm going to describe the mud pie factory in adult language. After a while, I realized these cobblestones were a great process setup. So over here, by the way, I always dragooned my little girl cousins into playing with me, and only in adult life did they tell me how much they hated me. I said, yeah, I have to play with the mud pies according to my process, or you're out of here. So we had the raw materials part of the process. Then we had the refinement process. Then we had the mixing process where the mud would be formed. Then we had the drying process. Then we had the decorating process, flowers and leaves or little rocks. And then we had the selling process.
You really are methodical, aren't you?
And everybody in the family thought this was just hilarious. And I come from a quite large extended family. So all the little girl cousins got dragooned into being my process managers. And all the little boy cousins would come in and fake eat the mud pies. And all of us little girls would say, no, it's mud, you can't eat it. But I realized later, I really had invented a process. So I've actually written a blog about this. Everything I learned about management, I learned in my mud pie factory. And it really, I think about it often because it's such a warm and happy memory. But I also realized, you really had a mind for this, being logical about stuff. And if I ever get around to writing a sequel to my first Wiley book, Fundraising the SMART Way, it'll be called my journey through the mud pie factory.
Oh, I think you should write it right now. I think you should get started. This is fascinating.
So there's a real mud pie factory in my background.
Wow.
And
Why do
um,
you think this whole mud pie philosophy can be really inspiring to nonprofits? Because I think you had a perfect description of, I have to say, I probably wasn't that logical when I made mud pies. I didn't go through all that whole process.
well,
So
most
I
people
wish
just
I had known
go
you
ahead and just
then.
go with it, right?
Maybe I would have saved the scar on my hand if I had somebody that
Right.
organized me some.
If you had sieved your mud, there would be no glass in your wrist. Um, One of the things I wanted to do when I started to work with nonprofits was to simplify and demystify what seemed not only mysterious, but scary and painful. And, it really is the rare person among us who says, oh boy, I can't wait to sell something. The majority of people will say to us in the nonprofit world, I'll do anything for you, including clean the toilets, as long as you don't ask me to ask for money. And they don't understand that the asking part is the easiest part. It's all the stuff that comes before. And so my mud pies, if we're going to continue this analogy, were gorgeous. And we could throw them at each other, and the boy cousins could pretend to eat them because I did the work at the beginning. And the work at the beginning isn't scary. The work at the beginning is being able to explain why you have this mission, what you and I would call the value proposition. It's not good enough to say, we are a legally certified 501c3 in the state of anxiety, whatever it is, and we're going to change the world. Doesn't mean anything. What means something is when you're able to say, these are the things that we do that help this population. And if these things resonate with you, you might be a candidate to get involved with us. But it's the simplifying of things that makes process management so intriguing to me.
I think that's so true. As you were talking about, nobody ever wakes up and says, I can't wait to go out and raise money for this organization. When I've done teaching, I've often started with that. And I remember I had one client there, I knew there was somebody who was going to say yes, but I asked the question anyway. I said, how many of you wake up this morning and said, I can't wait to go out and raise money for this organization? And sure enough, this guy raised his hand. So I involved him in the training and I said, okay, here's how do you go about asking? And it made everybody else feel at ease. And I said, the asking part is easy if you have the background work done first. But I knew that this was probably the only person in my whole career that I have ever had raise their hand that says, I can't wait to go out and ask for money.
Right, exactly. I had a very small client who had struggled to raise money, and she was depending on grants. I'm a big fan of grants in their place. And her entire board was like baffled and nervous. So I sat them all down in we had a retreat back in the days before COVID when you actually went someplace. Uh, and I said, our first exercise is we're going to pair up in twos. This is not a role play. I want you to ask each other, why are you involved with this organization? Now, I expected to give them, like us facilitators do, 5 minutes. And they kept saying, go away, because they kept asking each other, the 5 whys. Why are you doing this? And what's the reason behind why you're doing this? And what's the reason behind that? And you know that stuff. And it was one of the most productive things that changed the whole tenor of this organization. And for the first time in their lives, they were able to start getting individual donors.
That's really inspiring. I think you and I both I get so much energy when I see things like that happen with my clients. It's really
Well, it's thrilling, and that's why we're still working.
still
When
doing
everybody
it.
loves us, says, "When are you gonna retire already?" You're an idiot, right?
Other than the mud pie factory, I think that's reason enough. But is there anything else from your background that made you decide to get into this field?
Well, I have been working in sales a long time, and I had a love-hate relationship with it. And I had the luxury of about 6 months between losing my last sales job and starting my business. Excuse me, everybody. And I just sort of dived into the very big question: what is wrong with sales? Is it the product? Is it the training? Is it I couldn't figure out what it is. And then I realized it's not the clients. It's not being rejected. It's being able to clarify, simplify, and then be compassionate to people who have carried around this fear, anxiety, distaste, whatever they wanted to call it. I don't think I'm answering your question.
But you are, but one of the things that I know that you've developed is that I think is really revolutionary in this field is the ideal donor profiles. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that? Because I
Yeah, I
think
do. Let me quickly mention the leaky bucket. I don't want to go into too much detail, but the leaky bucket assessment, as far as I can tell, is the only popular or academic survey of internal capacity. Does the organizational team, from the board of directors to the janitor, understand what's going on in fundraising? Are there guidelines and guardrails and so on? And one of the first things was, do they know who's right for them? Because we've all experienced the misery of pouring in a lot of energy to try and convince somebody's friend's brother-in-law, who's got a lot of money, to give to your animal welfare association when they're not interested in animal welfare in any way, shape, or form. They just have a lot of money. So the ideal donor profile clarifies, this is a common theme in for-profit sales organizations. What are the characteristics of a buyer, be that buyer another business or an individual, most likely to invest, right? And first we have to understand what the value proposition is, but then we have to say, okay, what would the characteristics of a donor be who would respond to our value proposition? Now, in the marketing world, there are usually 2 components of an ideal customer profile. One is factual. Do they live in a certain zip code, have a certain level of education, have a past history of giving? Factoids like that. That stuff's important. But then we need what marketing people call the buyer persona. So I said, buyer persona, donor persona. What motivates people to invest in our nonprofit or to give to our nonprofit? And frankly, if you start to use the word invest, it makes life easier for people, including the donor. Give to me is less meaningful than I think this investment in social change is right up your alley. What do you think? So yeah, so those are the facts, and the giving motivations are two components. We decided to add a third component we call the danger signs. What are the characteristics we don't want in a donor? We don't want a donor who's got a history of being litigious. We don't want a donor, let's see, we're in a field where we are working with refugees or immigrants without legal status. We don't want people who think refugees and immigrants without legal status are scum, right? So having the danger signs there, we've got a 3-part profile that says we want them to have these motivations, we want them to have a reasonable match to these facts, and we don't want them to have these undesirable characteristics. So we actually created it's a form of a spreadsheet, a scoring mechanism, so that our people could figure out, our clients and their fundraising teams and fundraising volunteers could kind of ask certain open-ended questions that would reveal both the giving motivations and the danger signs. Because the facts, you can get the facts online. It's all public record.
I think to me, this is one of the most revolutionary things that's come along for fundraising in a long time, because you're right, a lot of people get the facts, and yes, that's easy. It wasn't as easy when we were first in this field. We had to go to the courthouse and look up property values and everything else. Now it's relatively easy to get those factual things, but the biggest mistake that I think people make, and you referred to this, is this what I call the tin cup mentality. It's like, you have money, we need money, give us some, Well,
Yeah.
the fact that they have money is only one factor, and there's always
right. Being needy does not
no.
provoke giving.
Right.
I mean, how many times have we all driven right past a home, an unhoused person with a sign up saying, help me?
And I have to add something to this that has nothing to do with fundraising, but
Yeah.
I think you're absolutely right. We all think, oh, I don't have time to wind down my window and throw that person some money. But my church did something that I thought was really amazing, and I think it was our pastor's idea. He went out and bought granola bars. Well, once a month, our church has a community breakfast where and there's no questions asked. Are you homeless? Are you legal? They don't ask anything. It's just whoever wants to comes to this meal. And not only do they get a meal, but they get clothing, hygiene supplies, and things like that. But he came up with this idea that when we see people on the street with those signs, we give them a granola bar, and on it is an invitation taped onto the granola bar.
That's ingenious.
That invites them to come to this. So when I stop, I usually, if I have a couple dollar bills or something, I'll wrap those around the granola bar. But I make sure I have time to tell them, please look at this before you open up the granola bar. Look at this invitation to our community breakfast and come, and the address is on there, phone number to call. And to me, that's taking that to the next step where you're trying to give people the hand up, not just a handout. So I think that you're absolutely right with that. Well, I don't want to take up too much of your time, but you've been in practice for almost 30 years, as I have. So I'm interested in what's next on your horizon.
Um, if you really add my whole career up, I've been in practice in one way or another for 50 years.
Maybe for more than that, if considering making those mud pies.
There was no money. The mud pie
No money
market was
involved.
very, very down. Um, yeah, it's time for me to do something else. And I want more time to spend with my husband. I want more time to write. I've always loved to write. And I'm kind of at the point where writing blogs and stuff isn't joyful. I'd like to dig into another book.
We
But
should
more
write a
than
book
it,
together again, Ellen.
oh my God, let's. I think that's a great idea.
I've got to stop saying this because I'm now working on like 4 books, but
Well,
I would love to work on one
you're
with
a
you.
book machine. When I first met you, you only had 12 books out. Now
Now
you
I'm
have
about 40, I think
112
I'm up
books
to.
out. Anyway, I think that's a hell of an idea. Um, when we'll call it brand new, innovative, never seen before breakthroughs by 2 old ladies. Um,
We should get Mud Pie into that
yeah, right.
book title
Uh,
somewhere.
um, but a few years ago, I started to think about the fact that I really can feel myself slowing down. I'd like to spend more time with my extended family. I'd like to, there are hobbies that I don't do anymore. You get the whole story. But something happened 3 years ago that was the most astonishing piece of serendipity ever. Now, I've always had a commitment that I'll speak to any student who reaches out, including a kindergartner. Okay. And one fine day, I get a cold email to Bristol Strategy Group from a young woman who says, I'm getting an advanced degree in nonprofit leadership and management, and I would really appreciate the opportunity to pick your brains. I want to become a fundraising consultant. And I said to myself, you got to talk to her and you got to tell her, honey, you got to have some business experience. So I was prepared to be nice and kind of, well, what do I discover? But she has 15 years of fundraising practice under her belt in both large, medium, and small organizations. She's done everything from grant writing to major gift programs. And like me, she's a nut for data. By the end of that first conversation, I had invited her to become my intern. And she says, oh, please let me intern for you. You don't pay me anything. Okay.
Can't refuse.
A few months later, I actually started to pay her because she was doing so much. And then she and her husband came back and said they would like to invest in the business. So I'm gradually moving away and doing less. I tire easily. I always have, but it's worse. And she has taken our leaky bucket assessment, and we're just announcing the rollout of the new version of the free leaky bucket. It's under assess. Look for leaky bucket light. It's absolutely astonishing. She kind of redesigned the whole thing so it's goes deeper, it's free, you get your results immediately, and it's got all kinds of eye candy in it. And then we jointly developed the professional edition, which takes everybody in the organization, collates their data, and produces a dashboard that shows where are the gaps, who in the organization doesn't understand fundraising, what simple, all those simple guidelines and guardrails, the use of KPIs, the use of tech, are they there? And it's premature, but I'll give you a sneak peek. We're now developing a campaign readiness intelligent assessment that does this, that also has,
that's
it's
exciting.
really robust, and it's
Great.
it doesn't look at, it's not a feasibility study. It's an internal capacity and readiness assessment. So the likelihood, and we're aiming toward this, is that my lead consultant, Dr. Courtney Ladisaw, will take over this business and buy it from me.
That's fantastic. I really
Which doesn't mean I'm not going to stay busy.
Right. Well, you have all those books to write and and people to mentor. I'm going to be starting to mentor somebody from Nigeria. Actually, I meet with her next week, so I'm really excited about.
It's terrific.
People who know me know I'm a fanatic over trees, and she runs an organization called the Tree Ministry. I think she's like 15.
Oh my God, that's wonderful. I mentored this 24-year-old kid from Uganda who's starting a school. Uganda's the poorest country imaginable. I think he's going to become the president of the country.
Wow.
And I mentor a very successful CEO of an operation in Kenya.
Oh.
So,
So
I don't know how those things
when
happen.
they say exit strategies, I don't think fundraisers really ever retire. They're kind of like clergy people. They never retire either.
You don't really retire. You just do less.
Right. And more things that we enjoy doing. Like for me, it's writing and teaching. And I think for you, those and mentoring people, those are the kind of things that keep us going. And I think you're a lot like me. I've always felt like I've had, a successful career, but now I want to leave a legacy for the profession that has given so much to me, not necessarily financially, but just been so rewarding to see the nonprofits that you work with really be successful. And I think you're a lot like that too.
1,000%. And I think we really ought to write another book together.
I think so
So
too.
much fun the last time.
Well, when we're just about ready to wrap up this podcast, but I do want to let people know that we're going to show you Ellen's links to get to her books that she's written, and also the Leaky Bucket that she's talked about. This is I think really exciting. Too many people forget that internal stuff and how important it is, and they focus on going out and telling a story to somebody that they don't even think or know that is interested in their story. So I'm really excited about this, and I hope you will check out Ellen's website and her Leaky Bucket and her books. And next thing you know, maybe next year this time, we'll see a new book by Ellen and Linda together. Are there any final words that you would like to leave us with, Ellen?
Now is a very bad time for everybody in the US. It's scary, but it's the time to dig in. It's the time to dig into your mission. One thing we did was recognizing that it's so scary financially. We have a whole year of workshops that we're doing, and we were going to charge for them. We made them free. Now is the time to push your mission forward. It doesn't matter if you have to do it with volunteers. It matters that you keep on doing it. If anything, the needs on a global basis are escalating exponentially, largely due to climate change. and the incredible number of local wars and other military actions. So don't give up hope. Keep on doing what you're doing. Read our stuff, mine and Linda's. Take advantage of free services, free workshops, whatever you can do. Raise money where you can, but don't give up hope now. We need you more than we've ever needed you.
Thank you so much, Helen. I really, I was excited to reconnect with you. It's been quite a few years, and we've both been through a lot in the last couple of years. But I want to thank you for being a guest on my podcast. And like I said, everybody, please do follow through and look up Ellen's work. It's really great. So we're going to close for now. And I think after we end this recording, I think Ellen and I are probably going to have a little confab about our next book. So thank you, Ellen. You've been great.
It's been a pleasure, Linda. I missed you, and I'm so happy we're back together.
Thanks.